Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel! Today we're diving into Anime Vanguards, 1 week after release, and it's time to rank the best units in the game. We've been testing them out in all the different modes, and honestly, some of these characters are absolute game changers, while others, well, let's just say they need a bit more love. Now, here's the deal. We're not just ranking based on sheer power alone. Rarity, power scaling, and how much investment a unit needs are all factors. A cheaper unit that performs well with less effort can easily outshine that shiny legendary pull. So, if you've been wondering which units are worth your time and resources, sit tight, grab a snack, and let's break it all down. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking units in Anime Vanguards. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching! The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Roku, Sasuke, Rukio, Naruto, Luffy, Ichigo, Sanjo, John, Joe, and Vegeta. Alright, let's dive into some of the D-tier rare units in Anime Vanguards, and believe me, it's a wild ride. So, starting with Roku, this guy is surprisingly strong for an early game rare unit. He packs a punch with decent DPS, and his passive can crank his attack up by 42%. Honestly, not bad if you're just starting out. But then, we've got Sasuke, who can dish out some solid burn damage. Even at 0 upgrades, this guy isn't too shabby. Definitely worth keeping around in those early stages when you're still figuring things out. Now, moving on to Rukio. Let me tell you, Rukio's DPS is insane for a rare unit, probably the highest among them. But the downside? His attack AoE is super small. You'll feel like you're hitting a nail with a needle. Then there's Naruto, who's kinda like your reliable friend in the early game. His stats are just solid overall, nothing too flashy, but hey, he gets the job done when you need him. But oh boy, we've got to talk about the not-so-great ones. Luffy, Ichigo, Sanjo, John, they're just not it. Luffy's range is kinda cool, but that's where the excitement ends. Ichigo's passive is just a sad little 20% damage boost. Yeah, you're not missing much. Sanjo and John? Whew, avoid at all costs. Like, John is probably the worst rare unit in the game. Just don't do it. Even Joe, with a decent passive, doesn't stack up against better options. And Vegeta? He's just meh. There are way better rares out there. Trust me, you're not gonna miss him. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Janus, Picleo, Inosaki, Zenitsu, Gari, and Shinzi. Alright, so let's talk about the C-tier units in Anime Vanguards. These guys are the ones you'll probably outgrow pretty quickly, but hey, they can still hold their own, kinda. Starting with Janus. Now, Janus isn't terrible. In fact, his burn damage is solid, and his attack speed goes through the roof with his passive. But compared to other epics, he's just okay. Better than Picleo in some areas, but not as versatile as some of the higher tier units. He's like that one character in the background doing their best, but you know there's always someone better just around the corner. Speaking of Picleo, he's actually one of the best epic DPS units early on. You can rely on him for a while, at least until you pull a legendary. He does his job, and he does it well, which is more than we can say for some of the others in this tier. Looking at you, Zenitsu. Poor Zenitsu. He just doesn't bring enough to the table. His DPS is lackluster, and when you compare him to units like Kakashi or Kinua, it's clear why he's chilling down in the C tier. Honestly, he's the guy who tries really hard but just can't keep up in a world of alligators and Kinuasis. Then there's Gari and Shinzi. These two, yikes. Gari's line AoE sounds cool on paper, but in practice, the damage is so low that you're better off pretending it didn't happen. And then Shinzi, oh boy, where do I even begin? Shinzi is the unit you look at and think, did the developers forget about this one? I mean, just don't use it. Please, save yourself the heartbreak. If you see Shinzi, just walk away. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Itochi, Roku Dark, Goi, Grimwow, Kinua, and Kakashi. Alright, let's dive into some of the B-tier units in Anime Vanguards, because I know a lot of you are probably wondering if these are worth your time. First up, Itochi. This guy has some of the best burn damage out of all the sub-mythic units. His DPS? Super solid. He might not be as flashy as some of the top-tier units, but if you like watching enemies slowly melt away while you rack up points, he's your go-to. Then we've got Roku Dark. Now, he's a bit of a hidden gem, and his passive is Chef's Kiss. He can straight up execute non-boss enemies, which makes him useful even when you've barely upgraded him. His DPS also holds up, so he's not just a one-trick pony. Seriously, don't sleep on Roku, especially if you're tackling those harder difficulties where every little advantage counts. Let's talk about Goi next. Pure DPS monster right here. The more enemies that come into his range, the harder he hits. Plus, he can dodge attacks, which is a huge help against bosses. He's not super fancy, but if you want someone who's going to do consistent damage and keep you from getting smacked around, Goi is your guy. And speaking of bosses, we can't forget Grim Wow. He's not amazing with range or DPS, but his passive makes him great for dealing with those beefy boss enemies. Just, don't expect him to take out crowds on his own. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Igros, Obita, Sosuke Hebi, Naruto Sage, Agony, Kinaru, and Alligator. Alright, let's dive into some of the A-tier units in Anime Vanguards because honestly, this tier is packed with some solid choices. Starting off with Igros. Now, the non-evolved Igros is already a pretty beefy unit. He's got the stats to back it up, but if you really want to unlock his potential, you need to evolve him. Once you do, he's an absolute powerhouse, but even before that, he's definitely no slouch. Then there's Obita, and this one's a bit of a mixed bag. His passive? It's kinda underwhelming for a mythic, but don't let that fool you. His base stats more than make up for it. He's one of those units that might not blow you away at first glance, but he's got that hidden strength that makes him a pretty solid pick. And then there's Sosuke Hebi. Oh boy, this guy, he's not it. His stats across the board, whether it's SPA, DMG, or range, they're just not doing him any favors. If you pull him, well, better luck next time. Now, Agony is one of those units that just screams support MVP. Full AoE right from placement and a knockback to boot? Yes, please. But here's the catch. You've got to pour some serious resources into him to get that SPA down to a manageable level. And don't even get me started on Alligator. The guy is a beast for an epic support unit. He slaps a near-permanent 50% slow debuff on enemies, which is massive, especially in boss fights. He's like Agony, but with way less of an investment headache. So yeah, A-tier is definitely bringing some heat. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Alucard, Vogeta Super Awakened, Obita Awakened, Sosuke Storm, Naruto Six Tails, Vogeta Super, Cha-In, Song Jinwoo, and Haruka Rin. Alright, let's dive into the world of S-tier Anime Vanguards units. If you're looking to dominate your matches, these top picks are where you want to focus your energy. First up, we have Alucard, who's practically a beast even without evolving. With his bleed effect, full AoE coverage, and incredible range, he's probably the best non-evo unit for infinite modes. Then there's Vogeta Super Awakened. This guy has seen some serious buffs, making him a top choice among mythics. His affordability and multi-hit ability are perfect for shredding through shields and making him a solid pick for many situations. Now, let's talk about Obita Awakened and Cha-In. Evo Obita's got impressive DPS and burn effects, though he might not have the same utility as some other top units like SJW or Cha-In. Speaking of Cha-In, she's arguably the best non-evo mythic around. Her crit passive and cone AoE attack are absolute game changers. And don't forget about Song Jinwoo and Haruka Rin. While non-evo Song Jinwoo isn't the flashiest on stats, his passive and multi-hit make him a key player, especially when evolved. Haruka Rin might seem underwhelming alone, but with the right team, her buffs can skyrocket your DPS. So there you have it. These S-tier units are definitely worth your attention in Anime Vanguards. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Alucard Vampire King, Igros Elite Knight, Cha-In Blade Dancer, Song Jinwoo Monarch, Haruka Rin Dancer, and Sprint Wagon. Alright, let's dive into the creme de la creme of Anime Vanguards with our S+ tier units. First up, we have Alucard, the Vampire King. Seriously, this guy is a game changer. He's got full AoE, insane range, and he bleeds his enemies dry with ease. Not to mention he's got a low SPA and massive base damage. The cherry on top? He can summon units that are now way more effective thanks to the SJW Nerf. If you want a powerhouse, Alucard is your go-to. Then there's Igros, the Elite Knight. Team him up with Evo SJW, and you've got a combo that's nearly unbeatable. The buffs they give each other are off the charts. Igro's is full AoE, multi-hit, and immune to stun, making him a real force to be reckoned with. His stats are solid, and he can hold his own in any fight. If you're looking for top-tier synergy, this duo is where it's at. Last but definitely not least, let's talk about Cha-In, the Blade Dancer. She's the top mythic right now, and for good reason. Evo Cha-In dodges and counters attacks with flair, has increased crit, and her DPS and range are just phenomenal. She even outshines Evo Igros and Evo Alucard in shorter modes. And don't forget about Song Jinwoo, the Monarch. Despite some nerfs, his DPS and unit summoning skills keep him in the top tier. And if you need a farm unit, Sprint Wagon's your guy. He's a must-have in any squad. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.